Good morning, Melissa.
Hi, Phyllis. How are you?
I'm great.
Good.
Did you get my second attachment
Yes, I did.
and you replaced the whole thing?
Yep.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Sure.
Betsy was pretty frazzled yesterday.
Oh.
Good morning, all.
Good morning, Steve.
I know John Gowan will not be here today.
Correct.
And do we have any need for a executive session this morning?
I don't believe so. I just threw one in just in case something would
Got
have
it.
come up.
Got it. Okay. Laughing at our CDs, what the interest rate is.
Oh, it gets worse. Oh, did you see the second page of rates?
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's unbelievable. I mean, it's good if you're buying a house, but I'm not. We're not.
Makes me think we should have done more in February. But of
Yeah.
course, who would anticipate it? It could have gotten worse.
Right.
Steve,
Morning.
hey, Hal's going to play with Tom Sheehan on that day.
Oh, okay. I'm not going to Oakland.
Yeah, he got 2 Landows and his cousin.
Oh, good.
Yeah, he texted me last night.
I didn't know I didn't. Darren, they surprisingly won the other day, so there's a chance he'd go. I don't feel like missing potentially his last game.
Yeah. I got the second shot of Moderna. Brandon and I both got it.
Yesterday?
I got it Tuesday.
Yeah.
Never sicker in my life.
Really?
I will never do that again.
Come on, you got to do your part. You got to do your part to get the 70%.
I had the COVID and I had the first shot, and at 64 years old, I don't know that I've ever been that sick. And it lasted for like 36 hours, and 2 o'clock this morning, it turned off like a light switch.
Wow.
But the first 36 hours were horrible. Brandon had the exact same timing because we both got the shot on Tuesday.
In the same boat?
Exactly the same thing.
Wow. It's probably because you have those. You already got the stuff in your system.
But now, according to our doctor friend in Ohio, now we've got the super immunity.
Oh, you're super immune.
Super immunity.
Good morning, all.
Morning, everybody.
Morning.
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 Super immune.
So you're super immune.
I'm immune to everything, including you, Bill.
That's some shot you got.
Chris, my wife asked me how long the Corona beard lasts, and I didn't have a good answer. Do you have an answer yet?
No, I don't. I thought it was going to be gone when I got my second vaccination shot. But then I asked my wife and daughter what they thought, and they said, keep it. So I was shocked at their response.
Huh. You've worn them down.
When we start having live meetings at Borough Hall, I'm sure it'll be gone because I think it's a little too ragged to be in too much public view, I think.
I bought one of those brawn trimmer things, and every couple of weeks, and I kind of cut it back a little bit.
I
Yeah,
saw
I
it in
haven't tried it.
person, Chris, on Tuesday, and it looked perfectly fine.
Oh, yeah, okay.
Oh, there you got another vote.
Yeah, apparently.
Hey, he lives in Ole. Cut him a break, you know. They're all that way.
That's right.
Hey, that's all right. Michelle and I went to Tulpahawken, so we're not much better.
They ride tractors to school up there too, right?
They did not do that when I was there.
Oh, is that right?
There was
before-
someone that did that as a joke my senior year.
Keith, that was before the engine, though. That's why.
Well, that's true, yeah. No, we had motorhead cars then. We had super sports and Mopars.
You took a Clydesdale.
Got it.
All right, I
Why?
believe it's 8 o'clock, so no sense wasting any time. Mostly take roll call.
Keith Starr,
Here,
Tom Mull,
Here,
John Gallen will be absent today, Steve Brunner,
Here.
and Greg Portner.
here.
Is there any, well, first of all, Chris, do we have to appoint someone to take John's spot today? Or are we good? Someone missing? Are we only doing that if we don't have a,
I don't think you have to do that unless you don't have a quorum. I don't know if that's.
okay, then we're good. All right. Moving on, any public comment?
Whoa.
What?
Any public comment? Last chance? Hearing none, moving on. Phyllis, hit it.
All right, at the end of April, cash and investments totaled 10,800,000. Of that amount, 6,796,000 was sitting in demand accounts at the bank. The majority at just 0.1%. The investments totaling 4 million consist of, we still had the ICS account open as also at 0.1%. Just keeping it open with the hope that interest rates will rebound. 2 certificates of deposit. The first one, 6 months, will mature in August. The second is 12 months and will mature next February. So with all that cash, which does represent a significant increase over both the end of March and the end of the calendar year, entirely due to the influx of the real estate tax collections during the discount period. If we add the pending reimbursements from DCED, which totaled 206,000, that is a typo with my formula there. The total cash would be 11,600,000 or 11,006,000. It would be great if we could get some interest on those balances, as they won't be needed immediately for capital expenditures. Melissa, if you go on to the next slide. I did check on interest rates. They were confirmed yesterday. A 3-month certificate deposit would be just 0.03%, less than we're earning on our checking and savings account. The only instrument, the only term that would yield more than what we have in our checking account would be a 12-month commitment. So at this time, I don't recommend any additional investments, just leaving the cash sit where it is to watch where interest rates go. Does everyone agree with that approach?
I do.
yeah, absolutely.
So.
I'm
No
a
movement.
I'm a VIST supporter and a big VIST banker, and I love them. But is there an opportunity here that if we go to a different bank, that somebody might want $2 million worth of new money for 6 months, they might want to be willing to do a deal?
Our debt arrangements that we entered into require us to keep our deposits at this bank.
But we don't have any debt, do we?
We don't, but we're still committed to that instrument, and it's available to us if we want to borrow on it.
Oh, why don't we take a peek around? Maybe we'll look around to see if there's a better interest rate somewhere else and figure that out later.
Okay, I'll do a little research.
Okay.
All right, looking at the fund balance and the April results. April resulted in a surplus of 2,110,000. When that amount is added to the previous year-to-date deficit of 160,000, it brings the year-to-date results to a surplus of 1,949,000. When that total is added to the beginning of the year fund balance of 9,499,000, it brings the overall fund balance at the end of April to 11,449,000. Of that amount, 534,000 is reserved for future commitments. I've highlighted again in peach the items that have changed since we last met. The first two items are the result of the receipt of the real estate transfer tax from the sale of the Equus properties. Council made a motion to reserve 163,000 for the public works facility study and engineering and so forth. The balance of the money received from the real estate tax transfer was reduced just by the purchase of the aeroclave, which was 15,000. That was the desanitation unit that was purchased, that was unbudgeted. So the remaining balance reserved for unbudgeted items is $163,000. The commitment for MS4 increased by another month worth of the 80,000 that had been budgeted, bringing the total commitment for MS4 to $266,000. The Equus reserve has now been removed as it was paid during the month of April. That total was 170,000, and that commitment has now been fulfilled. Payment was also made to Mr. Rehab for the sewer upgrades, and that reduces the balance to $68,000. So with all those reserves totaling 534,000, the unreserved fund balance at the end of April is 10,915,000. There is a pending activity for two reimbursements for application number 5 to Barwis, and the engineering fees, which I think have now been finalized. Receipt of those two reimbursements is anticipated any day. Also not yet included in fund balance would be the open permit fees. Permit expenses that have been incurred by the borough, but the permits have yet to been collected by the developers. Adding the pending activity to the unreserved fund balance would bring the overall fund balance to $11,145,000. Already included in that amount are uncollected receivables totaling $649,000. Any questions on the fund balance? No? Okay, moving on, Melissa. Did someone have a question? No? All right. If we compare the April results, when you look at the last 3 years, 19 through 21, you can see that the April results for 21 are significantly higher. That's a result entirely of real estate tax collection. When we look at the year-to-date results, you can see the same variance there. Expenditures are very uniform when we compare monthly results of April. They're 1.3 million each of the past years. Year-to-date results are also very similar. When you go on to look at the net results, here we go. You can see the April results of a surplus of 2,110,000, bringing the year-to-date surplus to 1,949,000, significantly higher than the past 2 years. Significant transactions during the month of April include the collection of real estate taxes. The borough received from the tax collector 2,153,000. As I mentioned before, the real estate transfer tax from the sale of the Equus properties, I believe that sale actually occurred in December, has been received. That was 341,000. We received reimbursement from DCED for Barwis application number 4 in the amount of 116,000. Recreation registrations continued. We're in our second month of playground registrations. although just 7,000 was received in the month of April. Year to date, we're about 20,000, so we're about 57% of our anticipated registration. Pool registrations opened during the month of April. 12,000 was received, and that's just 11% of what was anticipated. So those remain open with the pool opening scheduled for Memorial Day. Paid during the month of April, as I mentioned before, was the reimbursement to Equus for the amount of 170,000.
You remind me again, what that 170 was for? What are the soft costs?
There was an agreement with Equus at the very beginning of the project that they would front the first 200,000. They were billed for a number of things over the course of 2 years, and this is the amount in excess of the 200,000 that they wound up paying. So we returned it to them. Michelle,
Phyllis,
can you
we
add
think-
anything there?
Phyllis, the real estate taxes, we don't think this is an uptick, it's just a timing issue.
It is, yes, we will look at the detail next of real estate taxes.
Okay.
It is entirely, well, we did have a tax increase, but
Right.
yes, there is a timing issue.
To circle back to Greg's question, I mean, no, Phyllis's answer pretty much summarizes, we owed them that reimbursement. The agreement from the original planning commission minutes actually, I'm sorry, it was economic development approving that agreement stated that they were on the hook for up to 200,000 and no more. We ended up billing them for 370,000, hence the 170,000 reimbursement.
Okay, thanks.
Okay. All right, if we look at the gross real estate taxes, yes, there was an increase from 1920 to 21. And that does represent the dollar increase. However, if we look in terms of percent, that tells a better story. During the month of April, collections by the tax collector were 3,077,000. 923 of that was processed between Friday and Tuesday. So about 30% of that activity occurred right at the end of the discount period. So of the 3,077,000 that was collected, the borough recorded in receipts during the month of April, 2,153,000. But when we look at the tax collector's information and the gross rather than when the borough actually received the cash, you can see that the collections year to date through the end of April in 2021 are about 81%. That is up from the prior year, but a little less than 19. So a little rebound, but not back to the 2019 levels. The discount period, remember, during 2020 remained at April, but there was a lot of misinformation out there regarding when taxes would be due, and the flat period was extended through September.
Yep.
Okay, so keep in mind that 2,153,000 is what the borough received from the tax collector during the month of April. We roll forward. If you take that amount and net it against the discounts that were received, or the discounts that were taken, and the delinquent taxes that were received, the total net taxes for the month of April totaled 2,115,000. Year to date, the total is 2,815,000. So we do have a variance over the prior year. The percent is approaching what it was in 19, significantly higher than 2020.
And the percent is representing of dollars, correct?
Yeah, it is a percent in relationship to the total tax that had been collected. For 2021, it's a percent in relation to what we anticipate to be collected.
Correct. So the fact that there's a tax increase would represent the fact that we might not be at 81%, we might be at 80, something like that.
Well, as I said, it's in terms of what's anticipated for the current year.
Okay, got it.
So I'm looking at 63 versus 61 in 19, using 19 as the base rather than 20 because of the extended date. Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. All right. So if we go on and look at the other taxes other than real estate taxes, you can see for the real estate transfer tax line, the April receipt was 403,000. 341,000 of that was from the Equus properties. Tax on the other properties would therefore be 61,000. So when compared to April of 2020, it was actually about $9,000 less. However, if you look year to date, we still have a positive variance without considering the Equus sale in there. Right? If you
Okay.
look at the other taxes, there is a nice increase in earned income tax. I did discuss that with the Berks Earned Income Tax Bureau. And the big component in there that causes that to fluctuate that we cannot predict is the collection of non-residential earned income tax. That situation occurs when someone works in the borough, but they reside in a municipality that does not have a local tax. In those instances, the tax stays with the municipality where they work. Because of the business community in the borough, we have some very highly paid individuals in the banking industry as well as the gaming industry. When they get large payouts, the borough benefits because many of them don't live in the area and they live in areas that do not have local taxes. So those type of situations are very unpredictable and are contributing to the large variance that we see in our favor year to date through the end of April. Does that follow?
Follows, and I'm good with it.
All right. So as I said, it's difficult to predict, but in this case, it's in our favor. The same thing occurred in 2018, if you recall. All right, the mercantile tax has a small variance in our favor. Local services tax, however, does continue to have a negative variance. Investigation of that variance revealed not only the timing difference created by their distribution with the new software, but it's just a result of the pandemic. And we can look at a little more detail for local services in the following worksheets. If you could move on, Melissa. Okay, if we look at the mercantile tax, during the month of April, 107,000 was collected. Year to date, 190,000. It is an increase over 2020 of 41,000. So it does show a small recovery. It, however, is behind 2019. Wilson wanted to point out that of the 71,000 that was distributed, 7,000 of that amount was actually an audit settlement, which covered several years worth of taxes. So that's not something we should count on repeating.
Just keep track of those things for our purposes for budgeting for 2022.
Will do. And just as a reminder, the due date in 2020 was actually July. The current year due date is May. You can see in 2020, it took till about August until most of the year's mercantile tax had been collected. So we can expect that to occur probably in the June timeframe during the current year. So the time following the due date is when we'll see most of the year's taxes have been collected.
Great.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Okay. Moving on to the local services tax. During the month of April, collections were just 11,000, bringing year to date to 142,000. It is behind the prior year, 21,000. But what you'll notice is the highlighted amounts from 2020. You can see the third quarter and the fourth quarter there were 111,000. And when we look at what was collected in March of 2021, we do see a small uptick there, up to 117,000. So there is a small rebound, but we're not quite back to the 2019 levels. So taxes that we have no control over, but we will continue to monitor.
Good.
All right. And I think that takes us on to the capital projects recap. The first one we're looking at is for the 4th Street construction. The contract remains at $1,785,000. although over budget, will be fully reimbursed. During the month of April, on application number 4, the reimbursement was received in the amount of $116,000. On application number 5, council approved and payment was made in the amount of $6,000. For application number 6, the infrastructure committee did approve the $165,000. That will be before council next week for approval and subsequent payment. Application number 7 has been received. That represents work through the end of April, bringing the contract to about 53% complete. So the application for $149,000 will be going before the infrastructure committee for review and approval next week sometime. All right,
Okay,
any questions on 4th Street?
pretty
Okay,
much going
moving
as
on.
planned.
Pardon?
Said pretty much going as planned.
The street work for 2021, that contract has been signed, awarded to H&K Group in the amount of $376,000. That is $125,000 less than what had been budgeted. When
Good
we
for us.
budgeted in the fall, we were working with a bid that had been opened in March of 2020. And we removed from that bid the cost of Reading Boulevard. That's how we arrived at the estimate. But because the scope of the work had significantly changed, it was rebid in December of 2020. And this is the result. It was awarded to H&K for $376,000. Work is expected to begin, I believe, in the next few weeks. If you can scroll down a little further, Melissa, there's some other comments relating to the street work. Just to remind you, the scope of the project includes Cherrywood, which was actually delayed. It was a repaving of a street following a water project. So that amount will be funded from the water fund. The scope also includes Hill Avenue and the Park Pass. The 50/50 sidewalk program is currently out for bid, and that's budgeted for $90,000. Jim tells me that we did accept a few additional applications this year because the project had been suspended in 2020, but that he still continues to receive phone calls asking, for to be added to the list. And I think at this point, he's telling them it needs to wait to next year. So the program actually began in 2015. I think the intent was to run it for 5 years. Of course, last year it was suspended, but this would actually take us into, I guess, our 7th year. But there's still a need. People are still calling. All right. Any question on the street work?
Nothing here.
All right. The water project was approved. The contract was signed in the amount of $118,000. That is $38,000 less than budgeted, and work is also scheduled to begin later in May. All right. Going on to the sewer project, during the month of April, application number 2 was paid in the amount of $9,000. I believe Jim indicated that the next payment app will come closer to the completion of construction. That may be out in the June timeframe. If you can scroll down a little further, Melissa, there's notes about the 2021 work. I believe the bids have been opened and they have come in $31,000 over budget. So I think Jim had some discussion he wanted to share with committee regarding the 2021 sewer work. Jim?
Yeah, it's true. The budget amount was 200,000. The low bidder, Sewer Specialty Services, came in at 231,700. We had 4 bidders. The high end bidder was $340,000. On the low end, Sewer Specialties at 231,700. Mr. Rehab, who's doing the 2020 work, didn't even bid it because he said he has too much work and not enough manpower. The same old story. So I can only attribute this higher than budgeted amount due to that same scenario. These contractors, that cleaning and televising is really just a commodity in their business, and it's a matter of being busy and manpower.
Okay. Well, Phyllis, I think we need to just at the end of a year or at the end maybe every quarter, just recap what our total budgeted numbers were for everything combined versus what the bids came in at, and just sort of keep track of that as a total number.
Right?
Can we, I talked to Tom Boucher briefly. Can this committee recommend this to council for approval next week as opposed to infrastructure that will delay it a month? If you're so
Do you want us to approve the $9,691.06?
No, that's already been paid.
I thought so.
He's talking about the new contract.
Oh, the new contract.
recommend to award this to Sewer Specialty Services for $231,781.44, if you're so inclined.
And who did you say the next bidder was? Next lowest bidder?
The next lowest bidder, Vortex Services. I'm not aware of them. I've never heard of
Okay,
them.
that's fair enough.
They were close. They were the second bidder was close, 234,900.
And
then,
how well do you know the company that we're gonna potentially award this to?
Worked for us 2 or 3 times in the past, and I'm okay with them. Yeah.
Anybody inclined to make that motion?
What did we have budgeted?
I'll make it.
Second.
Okay,
What was budgeted?
$200,000.
200.
I mean, I hate
So
to
we
go over the
swung on
budget.
this one and missed by $31,000, but obviously we were
Yeah.
on the good side on some other budgeted numbers.
If
Just
it's
happens all over.
worth anything too, I believe the 2020 work, when it's all said and done, I can't give you a dollar figure, but it'll be under budget. The
Okay.
current work, yeah.
All right, so we have a recommendation and a second to award the contract to
Sewer Specialty Services Company.
Sewer Specialty Services Company in the amount of $231,700 and what?
$781.44.
So we have a recommendation and we have a motion and a second on that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passed.
Jim, and Tom Boucher was okay with it?
Yes.
Yeah, he was. Okay.
All right, the final page recaps all the capital expenditures. In the month of April, capital expenditures totaled 214,000, bringing the year-to-date total to 762,000 of the 4.4 budgeted. Dispersed during the month of April were additional supplies for the salt shed. Although a little bit over budget, there was some material returned, and that amount will be coming down to about 5,400 during the month of May. Also expended during the month of April was equipment for car number 9 that was replaced earlier in the year. That equipment totaled about $10,000. On the 4th Street reconstruction, you can see an amount of 13,000. That's a combination of the payment app that we previously discussed for 6,000, plus a relocation of one of the commercial signs that was in the construction zone. So the total expenditures there are 13,000. Under engineering, you see the expenditures total 176,000. 170 of that was the reimbursement that we discussed that went back to Equus. That amount had been budgeted. Under park improvements, the accumulated amount you see there is not for the pedestrian bridge, it's actually for the Stonehouse master plan that we had anticipated to be completed during 2020. The project just wasn't completed and fell into the current year. So the year-to-date expenditure on that is 14,000. That brings the contract to about 87% complete, with another 3,000 anticipated for the current year. The last capital expenditure we discussed was a payment to Mr. Rehab in the amount of $9,000. And that brings the total capital expenditures for the month of April to 214. Any questions there? All right, that's all I have for the month of April. I did want to share with the committee that we have received the Benetcon reimbursement for the 2020 surplus. We had budgeted 28,000. The amount was just received and deposited this week in the amount of just about 62,000. That 62,000 represents 50% of what's anticipated. The other 50% will probably arrive in December. That will bring the current year Benetcon reimbursement when received in December to approximately 124,000, where we had only budgeted 28,000. So far more than budget, but much less than what we received in the prior 2 years. I'll have more history on that to present with the May results. But good news there.
When you plan for a budget for that stuff, there's no way to plan for a pandemic. And across the healthcare industry, we have saw significantly reduced outlays of payments by insurance carriers just because people weren't getting the services done that would be what I would call optional services, getting knees replaced, those types of things for a couple months. That will pick up, and so will all the other medical claims. So we'll see how that moves forward.
So that's all I have to report. I think there's some other business on the agenda as well.
Yep.
Phyllis,
Right,
when you do the recap of capital expenditures versus budget that Steve asked about, pluses and negatives, can you include that Benetcon so at the end of the year when we talk about taxes, we can look at where we are positive compared to where we were budgeted?
We'll do that.
Yeah, Keith, that number is hard to pin down because you just don't know what it's based upon our claims and then the entire group's claims in the consortium. But yeah, we can do it. Obviously.
But it is a one-time windfall.
It's a 2-time windfall.
Yeah.
Correct. Okay, moving on to other business. Michelle, you want to talk about the 15% match?
Sure. The Architera study that Phyllis spoke about being roughly 87% complete. Dan and I went through the recommendations from that study so far to prioritize different projects we could pull out of there. The project we feel that is most important is the walkway, pathway, stairway, and handrail upgrades to the entire Stonehouse Park. Total cost of just those improvements is around $350,000. So in talking to Colleen, the thought is to go for the GTRP grant application. Again, it's the same grant application we applied for the Berkshire Heights Playground, which I'll follow up this conversation with the conversation on that. We would ask for $250,000. There's a 15% required match, which comes out to $37,500. So at this point, I'm just requesting when we start budget discussions for 2022, we make a note to reserve $37,500 for our match, assuming we do get funding for this project. And then to tie into that, there's a resolution that we need to include as part of our application that's due at the end of May that authorizes Pat and I to sign off on any documentation for that grant, and then also the acceptance of any funding we may receive.
Okay, so Phyllis will make a note to reserve to make sure we include that $37,000. Anytime we're getting an 85% payment, and we're only paying 15, I think that's always a good idea.
Is that something we want to reserve at this time or just start that in 2022?
No, that would be a 2022 budget item, so I'm not worried about that at this point. Okay, and then I guess I'll read this for the good of the group. There is a resolution of the Council of the Borough of Wyomissing, Berks County, Pennsylvania, authorizing actions relating to relating to receiving a greenways, trails, and recreation program grant for implementing of the Stonehouse Master Plan. And I'll make that motion. Anybody want to second it?
Second.
Any questions? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it.
So to circle back to the Berkshire Heights Playground grant application that we put in last year, the CFA finally announced those awards roughly 2 weeks ago. We had asked for $165,000, would have had the same 15% match for a total project cost of $205,000. We unfortunately only received $60,000. In looking at the cost estimate and talking it over with Dan and the company that would provide the playground equipment, we could either, based off the $60,000 funding and what we had budgeted for $40,000 for our match, we could either replace just the equipment or just replace the surface under the equipment and the ADA upgrades and walkways. To do half of the project either way makes no sense, because you have to either rip up the equipment to do the pad and then put the old equipment back in, or put new equipment in that you're eventually going to have to rip out anyways when you eventually redo the pads. So in Dan and my opinion, it makes sense for right now to just put that project on the back burner, put it back into the 5-year plan for recreation. And then again, looking at Architerra's study, we feel the liability at the Stonehouse, because of how heavily that's used, especially in the past year during the pandemic, that should take priority. Melissa, if you can flip to the documents I sent you yesterday. Colleen and I had a conversation with the CFA last week and explained about the study that Architerra has done for us, our intention to come in with a 2021 application for the overall Stonehouse walkway project. If you want to maybe zoom out a little bit and then go to page 5. So we went back to Architerra and asked them to break the entire walkway handrail stairway project into 4 phases. Phase 1, which is what you're looking at on the screen right now, would start with ADA access from Parkside Drive North down to the pond, ADA access to the tennis courts, ADA access to the gazebo, and ADA parking at the existing parking lot. We would have to add some new paved area. Total cost of all of this comes out to $100,000. So we have a request into the CFA to allow the $60,000 they awarded us for Berkshire Heights to be used for phase 1 instead. That $60,000 plus the $40,000 that we have budgeted would cover what's estimated at a $98,000 project cost, and that includes escalated cost of roughly 24% from 2020 price to 2021 price. The only expense not included in this that I have a conversation with Jim McCarthy later today is stormwater management, because we would be adding some paving for the ADA parking lot. We would have to do some type of stormwater management. He's estimating we could do porous paving, which will not only get us brownie points for MS4 because we can use it as a talking point about education. But the cost for that, he's thinking is going to be around $10,000. So we could move forward if the CFA approves our request, which based off the conversation last week, I think they will do. We could move forward with phase 1 of this project this year. And then if we're fortunate enough to get the $250,000 or any portion of it next year, we're breaking up the other $250,000 of the project into 3 separate phases, or 1 phase 2 we could do all at once based off of whatever funding we get. So the only request I would have from the committee at this time is to 1, approve moving forward with the CFA GTRP funds for the Stonehouse project instead of the Berkshire Heights project, and then also potentially authorize an additional $10,000 towards the project for stormwater management MS4 requirements.
And where in the budget where in the budget would we propose that $10,000 to come from?
We had some park improvement money budgeted for Berkshire Heights.
Separate from the other piece.
The stone house was not budgeted.
Right, but you're talking about, you said we had some money budgeted for the Berkshire Heights parking. Is that what you just said?
Melissa, can you back up to the last page of the capital projects recap? There, no, there we go. In park improvements, we had the pedestrian bridge, which does lead into Stonehouse. For park improvements.
So my question is, can we take this projected of $10,000 and apply it to another part of the budget somewhere in the place, or instead of using it from a reserved account for unbudgeted income?
And the only park improvement that was actually budgeted was the pedestrian bridge. I believe the Berkshire Heights playground was contingent upon the receipt of the grant money and was going to be revisited once the award was made.
Okay, so we're gonna have to, because I don't want to, that's not part of what we planned for the pedestrian bridge, so I don't think it's fair coming out of that part. Obviously, we're gonna be, listen, I'm all in favor of, even though we applied for 160 and we get 60, we're still only paying 15% of the number. So I'm all in favor of that. So I guess we take the 10,000 out for the improvements for the AD, is it ADA, parking improvement of $10,000 and take it out of the unbudgeted income. Anybody else have any comments on that?
Well, didn't we hear that one of our other projects came under budget by 30-some thousand?
Yes,
Phyllis, what was that project you just spoke of this morning?
that was,
Water or sewer?
It's a water, I believe.
there was another one that was $100 and some thousand below. Too.
That was a street.
Can't we just transfer some?
Greg, we can, but what we're trying to do is keep track of where we are in budget versus what we should be, but also on the income side. So in my opinion, this would be an unbudgeted expense. We would take it, since we have money in the unbudgeted revenue, we might as well take it out of there. Does anybody on the committee have any other ideas?
That was the idea of having the unbudgeted money.
Yeah. If you back up, Melissa, to the fund balance page. There we go. There we go. So of the money from the unanticipated money from the real estate transfer tax.
Yep.
163 has already been carved out for the public works facility. 163 remains of the balance. So your suggestion is to use that 163 to further this particular project.
I'd rather that than pollute it with something that we had, this is an unbudgeted item. I'd rather take it out of the unbudgeted income than show it that, at the end of the day, it looks like we're going to be okay on all our budget items for so far on all the contracts that we have. At the end of the day, that's fine, but I think we should keep track of this as an unbudgeted item to help us with moving forward in the future. So I'm going to make the recommendation we take it out of the unbudgeted income.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any other questions on that? Okay, so I'll take a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. So then I guess we need to make a motion. Do we have to make a motion, Michelle, for you to move forward with that?
Please and thank you.
Say that again.
I said, please and thank you.
Okay, then what are we making the motion for to
approve shifting the funding from the 2020 GTRP grant application from Berkshire Heights to the Stonehouse project phase 1, and to pull $10,000 of unbudgeted money towards that project for stormwater and MS4 requirements.
Okay. Anybody want to make a motion to that effect?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Peace. All right, all in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the ayes have it.
Thank you. And then the only item I'm aware of that's not on the agenda that Jim is also on the call for is to talk about the revised design for the Public Works facility. Jim, do you want to speak to that?
Sure, sure. I don't know, a year or two ago, we got approval to get a cost estimate for the possibility of expanding, improving the garage. When we did that, myself and our mechanic and a couple of my guys got together, discussed what we were looking for in this building, jotted down some ideas, met with Lee Olson, and basically developed a sketch plan, a footprint of what we were looking for. A year or two has gone by, and now we got approval to draw up bidding documents. And we revisited that with Lee Olson a week or two ago. And as we sat down, we had some better ideas. And it doesn't enlarge the footprint or the square footage, that remains the same. It probably lessens some of the demolition that we were involving, so I don't think it's going to increase costs at all. But because the changes were changed the footprint, Lee Olson needs or is requesting some extra money, and it was $7,500. Now I understand it's $5,000 to edit his drawings for our current comments.
It's a 5,000 not to exceed.
Yeah. And I don't know if I'm ignorant to how these things work, but I envisioned this when we got the approval for the bidding document, that we would sit down, make edits, they would change their documents, we'd look at it again, make some edits. I'm looking at it as a process so we get it right, as opposed to building a structure based on a 2-hour meeting 2 years ago. So I think we made some improvements, but it cost some money. I didn't understand the ramifications of it. I thought that was part of the monies we budgeted for that or allowed for that.
So we thought it was included in the fee that we paid 2 years ago?
No, that we approved some money to develop these plans, these bidding documents. And as part of that, I thought, hey, we look at drawings, we edit, we look at them again, we edit, so we get the final product correct. And I was just going through that process. But apparently, in the architecture world, that's a little too much detail. Yes, I don't know, but
all right.
I agree with you, Jim. But you know the way this Lee Olson makes it sound is like it's a 90% redo, as if they scrapped everything and only kept 10% of the plan, and now they have to start all over again.
Yeah. To me, and I don't know, and I don't understand architecture, but what we had started with was literally a drawing with a footprint of a new building and some sketches of some demolition to the existing building. So any changes we were starting from a very low point and made some changes. So I don't know. It baffles me.
I mean,
how close to the end do you think we are on this? Is it that we pay this up to $5,000 if we do that, and then turn around and have another bill 6 months later for $10,000?
I'd like to clarify that, because in my mind, he's gonna revise these plans. I'd like a second crack at them after he revises them, just to make sure to get it right. I'd hate to build a building and it's going to be here 30, 40 years and say, gee, we screwed that up, we screwed this. So the more eyeballs that are on it now, the better off we're going to be. But that's one thing we should clarify with Lee. If I go, you revise these plans from our last meeting, and we'd like another crack at them to verify and or due diligence, will there be more cost? I don't know. I don't know the answer to that.
Jim, how does this relate to the 163,000 that's already been reserved?
I don't know what was the number to draw up the bidding documents? What was that number? Is that the 160?
That was an amount that council arrived at. I'm not familiar with the background there.
Yeah.
Jim, I have a question about what occurred 2 years ago. Was the work product from 2 years ago something that represented a concept, or was it a set of drawings that you could have given to a contractor 2 years ago and it would have been buildable? Because what could be occurring is that the drawings from 2 years ago were not fully developed to actually be the basis of a construction project. But I don't know. I mean, can you describe, what was the level of detail on those drawings 2 years ago? Your
concept thought is what I looked at. That was a concept. There was no detail at all. It was a footprint and a elevation view, and that was it.
Right, because what I'm thinking is what you're paying for now is only partially for revisions, but you're also paying for putting it into more of a final form that can be the basis of a contract.
Yeah, it was nowhere near a bidding document. That's what we're doing now. It was a concept and a cost estimate. When they do those cost estimates, they look at it's a public works facility. We have a price per square foot that we generally use as a thumbnail, and develop that $4 million cost. Then we got approval to develop bidding documents where we need to go into some detail to make more detailed construction drawings, and that's what we are working on now. But originally, from 2 years ago, I looked at it as a concept.
Steve, is Pat. Can I make a suggestion?
Sure.
I think since there's confusion as to what exactly the architect is doing and what they're supposed to be doing and what they did do, I think he needs to provide to the borough a written proposal of what his fees are and what he's going to be doing for what. Initial consultation, follow-up drawing, follow-up to the follow-up number one, so forth. I think that needs to be in writing so the committee has an educated opinion to make.
Pat,
I would agree with that.
I agree with that too. The problem is we don't have the time for that. This needs to go out to bid in June. My suggestion would be, Jim McCarthy's been the contact with Lee Olson on this. Jim got the 7,500 down to 5,000 not to exceed. Jim, I can ask him to talk about this at council Tuesday evening under his report, to give you maybe some more background information before you would make a decision.
We did have a breakdown for that 163 though, didn't we?
I'm looking through my RACP and my community funding documents. And that's what I'm trying to find, and I'm not finding it because it wasn't part. I mean, that's not something we would get reimbursed for from a grant. So I'd actually have to go back through my email on this. But yes, we did have a breakdown for what that was for.
And did it include the design?
As I recall, I think it did. There was some portion of that was for the design.
Yes, I thought it did
some
too.
was for the general contractor, some was for oversight.
All right, well, we have to make a decision regardless to what the 163 was for. I think we can take it out of that amount, but if we don't approve this, paying of Lee Olson for up to the $5,000, it basically brings everything to a screeching halt. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes. Or you're gonna get a building that's not designed the way Jim and the Public Works Department want it to be designed.
And Jim, you may have just said this, and I apologize. The biggest difference from previous to now? I understand you said it would be less, it could be the same space, it could be less demolition, but what is the big difference between A and B?
I'm gonna say we did change the footprint, although the square footage did not increase. And we did that because we had concerns with the original layout. We'd be driving trucks over our underground fuel tanks, which we didn't think was a good idea. There were some turning radius issues with trucks and trailers. They had the police, there's a section for the police that they had as a whole separate building in an area that wasn't good for us, and we now included that in the main building. So there was probably 2 or 3 changes that changed the footprint but didn't increase the square footage.
Jim, are you going to have enough time, if this has to go out in June, for Olson to make the changes that you want, get the working drawings together, and for you to review them? And if you were to make any changes again, get back to him and have them done before June.
Well, we have to work quickly. But I think as a base plan, I think we got it good now. I don't know, again, I've never been involved with a project like this, but when it comes to, fit and finish, I guess they just make those decisions. I don't know how that works either,
Well, if all he has done is the A1 sheet on the drawings, he's got a lot of work to do before for bidding.
Yeah.
I gotta be honest, my only concern is that I realize we're under a time constraint here, but we're looking at a $3 million project that now we're making 90% changes within a 2 or 3 week period. I sure hope we get this right. I mean, it sure sounds like we're making a lot of quick decisions here.
I agree with that.
Yeah. Well, I think we've made better decisions. We've improved it. That first whack at it 2 years ago, we were developing a concept, and now we're developing plans to get it right.
Somehow we got to figure out, though, how much more than, if any, more than $5,000 we would be spending.
Hey, John Woodward here. If I could just pipe in with my 2 cents, aren't architectural fees typically at least 8% of the project cost? Well, 8% of $4 million is $320,000. I don't understand how we can get bid documents for $168,000. I just don't understand that.
Okay, so I finally found the email. For architectural, structural, site, HVAC, piping, electrical, fire protection, it would be 145,000 up to bid opening, and then we added construction management to the above, which brought it up to 163,000. So, and I mean, that is based off of, that proposal letter that council approved. That 163 covers all of that.
So this $5,000 would be up to $5,000 would be part of that 163.
Correct.
No, it would be added to the
above.
145.
But it would be on that line item is what I'm getting at.
Yeah, but
Out of the same, yes.
But to John's point, 145,000.
Yeah, versus 360 is a big difference.
I'm fine with spending the 5,000. I'm just concerned about rushing through a project.
Well, at this point, we haven't gotten the funds for the account yet, right? Michelle?
Meaning the grant awards? No.
Yeah.
No, we won't find out about those until summer at the earliest, which is why we have to bid it before we even find out if we're awarded the funding.
And if we were to find out that something is, if we missed something along the way of, for the architectural fees, that could be something that could be made up in the 2022 budget.
I don't see why not.
Okay.
I can also, like I said, ask Jim McCarthy to provide more information at next week's council meeting before you formally vote on approving this.
Say that again.
That makes sense.
I said I can also ask Jim McCarthy, since he's been the contact with Olson, like Olson's almost working under Jim's contract, so to speak. I can ask Jim to present more information at next week's council meeting regarding what Olson is doing, the timing, what else may be required, et cetera, at next week's council meeting.
Okay, so then this group would just need to give the approval to council that once we're satisfied with the answer, we can go ahead and approve this, up to $5,000.
Yeah, we can do that.
Okay. All right, so we have a motion to, well, we don't have a motion yet, but we have a, on the table, we're gonna pay, is it that we're paying Olson or are we paying McCarthy?
We're paying Olson.
Okay, to pay Olson Architectural Firm, whatever their name is, up to $5,000 for changes and additions to the bid documents for the Public Works facility. I'll make that motion with the note that we're gonna have to take a closer look at this for the 2022 budget.
I'll second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So have Jim be able to talk to us at the council meeting next week.
Will do.
Thank you. Any other business? We have something from the Fire and Police Committee.
Yes, sir. I apologize. Chief Phillips is not available this morning. He's actually in training, management training, so he will not be able to be here. At Fire and Police, we found out, and Chief Phillips actually found out from the feds that Wyomissing, before before Lieutenant Endy left, he applied for a grant to purchase and assist in purchasing body-worn cameras and also total camera systems for the cars and police officers. So I have two quotes here. This is a matching grant, $23,000 by the federal government, and the borough would have to make up at least $23,000 of that. The prices we have so far, we are still waiting for a price on the installation, but I will give you what I have so far just to kind of get your opinion as to whether we want to go further or just stick with the body-worn cameras. The body-worn camera quote for just the police officers having the body-worn cameras, 16 of them, the total price for that is $55,640. That includes the software system, the management system, the cloud system, and so forth. The federal government would basically put $23,000 towards that, which would leave the borough's obligation at about $32,640. That's the match and remainder of the project cost. The second system is a bundle system, which includes video cameras in the car, front, rear, and facing the driver, as well as the 16 body camera system. That price is $70,325. With the match, brings it down to $47,325. That would be the borough's cost. The stickler is that these quotes, when they were prepared by Motorola, did not include the installation fees for the cameras in the police cars. Chief Phillips has requested that from our local Motorola shop, RMI. He has not received that yet, but it appears it could be up as much as $30,000 worth of installation costs, which would be basically take the project back up to around $74,000. So basically you have two options: the body cameras only, which would be the $32,640, or the car and body cameras, which could be up to $77,000. So I just wanted to get your take on that. And
Fire and police, we did say there was, what was budgeted, 20-some thousand is in the budget? for body cameras?
No, there's nothing in the budget for body cameras.
That was one of the capital items that was removed, Keith.
Oh, it was removed, because I thought Chief Phillips said there was something in the budget for it.
He very well may have, but we did, Phyllis did check the budget. It was a removed capital item.
And when
But-
is the, I can't get my camera view back up here, so I apologize. When is the $23,000 match need to be used by?
Pretty much by the end of the year.
So if we think we're going to go with body cameras and or cameras for the cars, it'd be naive for us not to accept the $23,000 anyway, even though we don't have it as a budgeted item. Is that what I'm hearing?
I think you got to do it. In today's times, you got to do this.
Oh, I'm not arguing the need for the body cameras and maybe even the additional cameras, but I'm arguing how do we handle it on the budget side?
I would do the body cameras this year, take the 23,000 match, budget for the car cameras next year, and take it out of the uncommitted, unbudgeted revenue.
Wow, it's almost like you and I think alike. Okay. Now the question then becomes, how much more do we spend on the non-body camera items if we break it out into two different things? Are we getting a discount for the whole thing that we would be throwing away?
I'm sorry, I'm not going to be able to answer that. If you want to basically table this until the next finance meeting, that may give us the information back on the installation cost, so you would have a total cost estimate, and we can also find that out if you break out these and make it into two projects, whether there be any cost difference.
I think if you want to look at this thing as a project in total, the video cameras for the inside of the cars, I think, is just as important as the body camera. The cameras on the inside of the car give a panoramic view of the entire scene. There's a lot of information that could be outside of the view of the body camera that would lend itself nicely if something happened to one of the guys and somebody else was involved that you didn't see, another person outside the body camera area that had a gun. It just adds, it's at a layer of protection. It also gives the license plate of the car itself. I think they're necessary. I think the two go hand in hand.
That makes sense. I can't say I would agree. I agree. I'm not saying I have the knowledge to agree, but I agree with what you're saying. But if we can break this up and take the $23,000 towards the quote unquote body cameras, I mean, unless John comes back and says that the internal of the car is more important than the body camera, I'd be okay with that. But what I want to do is spend the $23,000 that we're going to get, because if we don't, we're not going to have it next year.
Well, exactly. But I'm just saying that if we can possibly squeeze the money someplace and we can get, I'm sure there's going to be some kind of a discount to Motorola if we buy the thing as a package. If we can conjure up the money somewhere along the line.
All right.
And I'm sorry, I can't give you a better installation price, but it was, the body camera systems are in such demand right now. It's very difficult from the vendors, which Motorola is a co-stars vendor, which exempts us from the bidding process through state contract. It was very difficult even to get the equipment quotes back. And then we found out that that did not include the installation.
Okay. So if we get to 23,000, do we have the liberty to use that within the car or choose as body cameras? And I'm just talking about for this year, because I'm in total agreement that we need to, for the good of all, including the police, have this stuff installed. So I'm just trying to find a way to use the $23,000 component and then budget everything else as much as possible for next year. Now, if they come back and say the entire package is 15% more expensive by not buying the package over the year, then we have another discussion to make.
I can find that information out and report back at next finance.
Is everybody good with that? Are we good waiting another month?
Yeah, as long as there's no time frame for accepting the 23,000.
I'd also like to know how much exactly, I'm getting kind of confused here, with all the numbers, is coming out of the unbudgeted revenue for this year?
We don't know that yet. That's what we're trying to find out.
Okay, all right, that's what all right. Thank
And we're
you.
also going to try to find out if we can shove it into a budgeted item in 2022, or some of it at least.
I understand.
Steve, I can have Chief Phillips under his report for a council meeting, have that information available.
That'd be great.
Okay. I'll tell the chief to have that information available for you for Tuesday evening.
Okay. All right. So we don't need to do anything then at this point on this.
No, I'll relay your things to the chief and have that information ready.
Okay. Now,
Thank you.
if we find out that there's a time constraint on the $23,000 that we would get in grant money for this, I want to act on it immediately. And I think,
Right.
does everybody on the committee agree with that?
Yes.
Okay. So as long as we're good till the end of the year, I think we're good to have them discuss it on Tuesday and then go from there. But the sooner we get cameras in some sort on the police officers or with the police officers, I think the better everybody else is in the community, including the police officers.
Thank you.
Okay.
Zach, we should also probably get Chief a list of what his budget really is, because he clearly thought he had dollars reserved for this.
Well, he can explain that. Maybe he's taking robbing Peter to pay Paul, no pun intended, I guess, with the police. Okay. Is there any other business for the good of the group then? Okay. Hearing none, meeting is adjourned.
Thank you.
Thank you to all.
Thank you.